Last week we did a video on FNAF 2's models. This week we're going to do a video on FNAF 3's models. And before the video starts, I just want to refresh you guys on what a vertex, edge, and face is. A vertices is the point at which triangles will meet, or these guys right here. An edge is the lines that make up a triangle, so one triangle would have 3 individual edges. And a face, otherwise known as a tri, is just simply what you can imagine it is, the actual face of the triangle. Alright, let's get started. So obviously Springtrap is the main animatronic in FNAF 3, and his model is obviously going to be the best, so I think it's best we save the best for last. So let's start out with the Phantom animatronics. Now we have 6 Phantom animatronics to look at, and so to start us off, I think we'll go with Phantom Freddy. Now Phantom Freddy's model contains 177,101 faces and 352,159 edges. As you can see, there's a lot more polywork done on the arms and the legs than anything else. And as you can see here, in his normal FNAF 3 pose, you actually wouldn't normally be able to see this, but his head is detached from his body, just sort of floating all ghost-like. Now, if this was intentional to be sort of a Phantom-themed thing, then that's pretty cool. But if this was really just something that Scott knew you'd never see, and was only supposed to be something that would make his life easier, then that's also alright too. This model definitely looks based off of Golden Freddy from FNAF 2, with the wires hanging out, a missing left ear, and very similar tears in its fur. However, unlike Golden Freddy's model, this model actually has eyes. On top of that, it's standing, something you never see Golden Freddy do in the first FNAF games. He also sports the same top hat and carries around the same mic that Golden Freddy had. Up next we have Chica. Now this one looks a lot more burnt than any of the other animatronics, with a lot of her fur being matted charcoal black. It really gives off that burned feeling. This model has 66,850 faces and 134,917 edges. But unlike Freddy, there's not nearly as many polys utilized on her arms. I think this is because there's no tearing on the arms or legs for Chica, so they didn't need to add all these extra models to work with when making those little tears. But then again, I'm not a model artist, so I can't be for sure on that. Now this model obviously comes from FNAF 1, which is kinda strange, as it's the only animatronic that actually came from FNAF 1. The rest of the animatronics we're gonna cover today all either came from FNAF 2, or came from FNAF 3, being Springtrap. So it's strange to see her in this game, but maybe it's because canonically, Chica was the first animatronic used to stuff a victim in. So that could definitely explain why this version of Chica would be in this game. You can still see the endoskeleton inside of her if you peek through this little hole in her arm here, and this model also comes with a version of the cupcake that is also very burnt. It doesn't utilize too many polys as you can see here, but it does look like a little cute model. Up next we have Phantom Foxy. This model has 152,544 faces and 303,684 edges. Now this animatronic model is obviously based off the FNAF 2 Foxy model. It shares a lot of similarities, and the only differences that it has are in the burns of this Foxy's model. Compared to the FNAF 2 model, this model is missing its right arm. A lot more of his fur has been either burned off or discolored. However, his endoskeleton does remain pretty well intact, not showing any signs of burn distress at all, which is a little strange. Maybe it's a forgotten detail that Scott should have added. Or maybe jet fuel just really can't melt steel beams. I guess we'll never know. You can also see quite a lot of Foxy's endoskeleton, obviously, since there's been a lot of burning through his fur. A lot of exposed wiring and metal just protrudes from his arms and his chest. And if we take a closer look at his skull here, we can see the classic FNAF 3 burned eyes as well as the actual Endo's skull. And personally, I really do like this model. Up next, we have the puppet. Now, the puppet is the most simplistic model we're going to be taking a look at today, only containing 35,802 faces and 73,498 edges. Just like FNAF 2, this model is very basic. The only differences between then and now is that this model is very, very burnt. It doesn't use many polys on the arms, the legs, the chest, but it does have this weird little divot in its hip. We don't see this in the FNAF 2 model, and since we don't see the puppet's body moving in FNAF 3, I can't imagine why this is here. There's no reason to have this here. There wouldn't really be any need to utilize it for animation since we never see the bottom of his body moving, and overall just kind of sticks out like a sore thumb. It keeps its simplistic hands and feet, although remaining burned as the FNAF 3 animatronics do, and still has nothing behind the mask. The only difference between this puppet and the FNAF 2 puppet, aside from the burns, is that this puppet does have eyes, which we don't see in the FNAF 2 puppet. Then again, Golden Freddy does also have eyes in this game, so maybe that's a hint at something that I'm just not getting, but who knows. There is a lot of details in her cheek, trying to make it as round as possible, I guess, which makes sense, but a lot of the work is done in the textures alone, and keeps this model pretty simplistic. Up next, we have Mangle. Now, this version of Mangle and FNAF 2's version of Mangle look almost identical. Since the endoskeletons in this game don't seem to get any burn marks on them, a lot of Mangle's body has been spared aside from her hand, foot, and head. This model contains 174,421 faces and 328,411 edges. This model is highly detailed, and I don't want to stick on it too long because we did cover it in the FNAF 2 video, and since nothing else besides the general texture work has been changed, I think we'll keep this one brief. But as we can see, Mangle does look very worse for wear around the head, and as someone pointed out in my last video, Mangle doesn't actually have a forward and backward facing foot on one leg. It has two different legs that get grouped together when the model is T-posed. So thank you to this comment right here for pointing that out. Another thing that I didn't mention in my last video, but is pretty interesting for this video, is that Foxy has two different kinds of endoskeleton foot models. If we take a look at this exposed foot model here, we can see the middle part of the toe is much thicker on this foot than it is on the other foot, as you can see here, which is somewhat strange, and it leads to the question, how many Funtime Foxys were really in this pizzeria? Up next we have Balloon Boy, who's the second smallest model in the game. This one coming in at 42,362 faces and 79,206 edges, remains very similar to FNAF 2, keeping the same general textures, body shape, and style. However, in this game he is missing his balloons and his balloon sign. I can only imagine that those were burned in the fire because I can't imagine a balloon withstanding that, nor a wooden sign. I mean, it's a miracle on its own that any of these animatronics even made it out of the fire to begin with. But as we can see, this model is very simplistic. The only main modeling difference from the previous game is that this one actually does have 3D buttons, but everything else seems to be relatively the same. If we take a look in his mouth here, we can see there's a little bit of a weird texture mapping issue in the back, but I'm sure this wouldn't even be seen in the game, so it doesn't really matter. And he retains those Funtime animatronic cheeks while also having those burned, scary eyes. There isn't too much to cover in this one versus the last one, so I think we can move on to what we've all been waiting for. And that is William Afton himself, Springtrap. This model is the largest model we're looking at today, coming in at 785,487 faces and 1,580,903 edges. This model is simply insane, and it's a work of art. So much detail has gone into this. I mean, as you can take a look here, there's so much poly work, both on the exterior and on the interior. If we take a closer look at his eyes, you can see that they are very different from any animatronic we've looked at today. Still burned, but retaining a lot more human characteristics to him. You can see through the costume all of Afton's organs and whatever remains of him. Although the jump scare didn't quite exactly get to what we wanted it to be, we still have to give Scott his flowers. He did a really good job at making this model. All the intricacies, the wires, the tears, the endoskeleton, the remains, it all ties together very well. And for anyone wondering, this is what Springtrap looks like without his mask. This is truly William Afton. And just to expose him a little bit further, here's what Michael Afton looks like as just an endoskeleton in his spring locks. This model on its own probably has more polys than Balloon Boy's model and is really intricately done. It genuinely is horrifying and is a beautiful model. You can take a look at the back here and see all these twisted up organs, which would most likely be intestines, I'd think, just with the length and ropiness of them. And if we take another look at his skull, you can just see the spring locks that went right through his head, forcing him to stay alive. This is probably one of the cooler models of FNAF, and I am super excited that I got to show you guys today. Other than that though, that is all we got for FNAF 3's animatronic models, so I hope you enjoyed this video. And if you did, maybe check out one of the other two videos that I did last week. We already have a FNAF 1 and FNAF 2 model review, so if you're interested in more of these kind of videos, check those out right here. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.